Hello, hello.
Hey, yo,
How you doing, my man?
I'm good. How you?
I'm excellent. I
Ooh, you got that zoom there, right?
yeah, let me zoom it back out. Sorry. Zoomed in too much. All right, cool.
Alright, so shall we start off with some introductions? So,
Sure.
alright,
Uh, would you like me to go first or you go first?
I can go first. I'm Kevin. My channel is called Kevites with two V's, and I do a lot of like reviews. And really, for this buildspace season 3, I'm trying to connect with other people, get you know get people's projects out there and kind of get them the attention that they want. And additionally, for people new to the space, they can kind of have a repository of videos to kind of look at, see what people is working on, and kind of like learn from, the development of other projects.
Cool. My name's Jake, aka Weedlechamp. Um, you know, obviously just in Build Space Nights a Weekend Season 3. Um, trying to build out like a podcast network or automated podcast pipeline using AI. Um, So I guess like the overarching goal is like how do we make content at 10x the speed
Mm-hmm.
using AI that people actually want to listen to?
Yeah.
Which seems like a hard challenge, but the goal of Build Space, goal of these 6 weeks is just to like prove out the concept. Like, is this something that's ready for prime time? Can you use the existing AI stuff to
Mm-hmm. Does
actually
it
produce this type of content?
does it bring value to
Right.
someone? Yeah.
Right. And so we're just trying to like prove that out because I thought that'd be kind of fun. I have no background in any sort of content creation, podcast or otherwise. The first time I used an audio editor was just the other day. Um, so this is very new territory for me on multiple fronts. Though I did start playing with generative AI like 3 or 4 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
when things were very different than they are now.
Yeah.
Uh, I was working for an AI startup in San Diego, and then I left that and I started to do stuff in Web3. Created an NFT collection. We sold out in 42 seconds. Um, I did that for a long time, and then I kind of pivoted and did a NFT services company. So we did a bunch of development work for like 2 dozen different NFT projects,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that was good until it wasn't. And then I just kind of got burnt out of the Web3 space. Obviously, the AI hype was picking back up. There's all these new shiny tools that I hadn't played with, and I just wanted to kind of like jump in and see what I could do.
Yeah. Absolutely. I actually recognize your username back when I first started. When Buildspace was still doing Web3 tutorials, you were very active in like the NFT collection and marketing your thing. If I remember correctly, you were like selling different dogs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
doggos.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Those were very different times, and Buildspace completely changed. Um, But yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about um, some of the tools that you're using for the AI podcast. Like on Twitter, I've seen some commenters ask like what tools you use. Is it like some mobile app or web app, or did you do it all the custom design yourself and stuff like that?
Sure. I'm exploring how to not use other platforms for things like text to speech. Um, Ideally, I'd like to get to a point where we're not like API regulated or like where the more content we put out, we're limited by just how much it costs or that it costs a lot.
Hmm.
So we've been using like 11 Labs, which is fantastic, but a little pricey. We pay for like the $99 a month package. We also use play.ht, which in some ways is better than 11 Labs,
Hmm.
um, but we've been using the free tier there. I obviously am subscribed to the OpenAI Plus, so we've been using GPT-4 for pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we used Soundful to generate AI music for the yesteryear chronicles, for the intro, for the outro. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got AI music. Originally, we were using Midjourney also to make the thumbnails for the
Yeah, the
podcast.
images. Yeah.
And then the last thing, I just started using Memento.fm, which allowed me to get that awesome social media post yesterday that a lot of people said they liked. So we use a whole bucket of tools, but eventually I'd like to clone or create, train my own AI models. So we're looking into that.
Yeah. That sounds really cool, and there's a ton of tools coming out that are like very new that kind of have the same concept of like, oh, text to voice or voice to text, and how we can use AI to like make that easier, make that like simpler. Um, but I also wanted to talk to you about some of the logistical kind of issues, because in the creative industry, it's obviously a very sensitive topic. Like, there's like copyright issues, people saying that you're basically stealing other people's work when you use AI, and there has to be more regulations around it. And I'm kind of thinking like, um, what did that mean for you, and how will you respond to like those kind of suggestions or accusations of like, hey, you can't use my voice, or hey, you can use my voice but you have to pay me, and how are you going to plan to navigate that situation?
Uh, well, we never want to use people's voices unless we feel like they'd be okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think we're entering a very weird world of voice cloning and, deep fakes. And I definitely think there should be regulation around that. Somebody's livelihood. So, for example, like the Drake songs that are coming out, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as my knowledge, like Drake has never been like, you guys go ahead and make songs that sound just like me. So while I've enjoyed some of the Drake songs, I think they're great. I think regulations should be put in place to prevent something like that if the artist doesn't wish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only celebrity voice that we've used so far has been Grimes,
Mm-hmm.
and Grimes has been very active on Twitter, obviously, saying that she invites the experimentation with her voice.
Mm-hmm.
She's even got a system now to revenue share
Yeah.
songs made with her voice. So, like, hats off to Grimes, and that's obviously why we use Grimes. So, I am interested in other people's voices and using them, especially, um, if they're okay with it, stating that these are AI generated voices, these aren't, realistic voices. And I think we're kind of in an in between time where maybe that's not the worst thing. So, for example, we're not the first AI podcast. We're maybe the first like ongoing series of AI podcasts with the yesteryear
Mm-hmm.
chronicles, which is awesome. But I remember the Steve Jobs Joe Rogan interview, right? And I just think that was like a very interesting and very great example of like what this technology is capable of, while it's very explicitly saying, "Hey, these aren't the real people; these aren't their voices."
Yeah.
And I think it was just a good proof of concept. And so I think as we move forward, that should get kind of hammered out so that we're only using people's voices with permission. Now that goes to voice cloning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as far as training, right, which I think maybe you're alluding to too, with all the data that gets used to train these giant models, as far as I know, the actual large speech synthesis models use open source data. I think they
Mm-hmm.
use the LibriVox library, which is like a bunch of open source audiobooks. So those like free to use any way you want. So people train these models on them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we could get more into kind of how I think about content more generally, um, for like Midjourney and ChatGPT, if you want to go down that route.
Yeah. Sure. Let's go down that route a little bit more. And so I'm actually a content creator myself, like making YouTube videos, and it's also very new to me. And very early on, I was asking for feedback on one of my earlier videos, and someone was like, your voice, you don't sound very excited. You sound kind of boring. I'm not really paying attention. You should use AI to like kind of voice your script. And I don't mean to like bang out on this too much because they obviously meant that as like just a suggestion of like, oh hey, if you're like willing, you can use this technology, and it might help with engagement. um but I feel like that really takes away from like kind of like the half of like what the content is really about, because like I I'm a fan of going to like local events like story slams and poetry slams, and at those events I get like emotional, right? So I hear stories, I hear people's tone of voices, and I know that there's significant meaning and experiences behind those things. Whereas for AI generated content, they're just finding the pattern of words that sound good together and can evoke a certain, reaction, but it's not like fully genuine. Um, so I was wondering like if you guys were thinking about that as well, and also if you were actually reviewing the output and like maybe editing it in some way, and like if the what are the human steps that are actually being taken into your application?
Okay, well, that's definitely a lot of questions. So I think I want to focus first on the first one in regards to like the genuineness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my girlfriend is a designer, and me and her actually have very differing views on this. We've been talking about generative AI for years, since I've been playing with it for years.
Mm-hmm.
But she's much more worried and much more negative, and just not not as enthused about it, right?
Yeah.
And for my part, I don't think AI will replace people, because I think at the end of the day, people want to connect with people.
Yeah.
So, it's funny that we're doing this experiment, and part of it is to see, like, can you build a connection? Um, I truly don't think people are going away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think there's any sort of AI system in the world that can like take somebody who's beloved, um, let's say like a Lex Friedman, right? Like, you know, no AI is going to be able to replace the way people feel about him or the way people follow his story. Same with all the other major influencers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess that's part of how I think about it. You also asked another question in regards to reviewing the outputs and what we do. Um, so we have two different shows. We have the grimeylove podcast, which we released one episode of, and then we
Mm-hmm.
have the yesteryear chronicles. So the yesteryear chronicles was our first kind of V1 for nights and weekends, and for that we've gotten to a point where we've built a prompt system for GPT-4. We're able to do minimal edits,
Mm-hmm.
right? But this is kind of after we've dictated the format, found the intro, the outro. We have two voices that we've worked on to try to give them, their voices have character, but then we've tried to make them speak and give them like an identity that
Mm-hmm.
persists. Uh, whether it's like one is more focused on science technology and makes all the jokes, and the other one's more serious and really does a lot of the more hardcore history and military history stuff. Um, so we've tried to give these characters so they can play off each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like something that we had to input, obviously, into that. Even though that we're able to prompt the AI and to get these outputs that kind of conform to how we see these characters,
Mm-hmm.
We really had to kind of build the vision. So that kind of goes into it. For the Grimy Love podcast, which we're getting a lot of really positive feedback on, um, I'll say that I actually spent a lot of time. Like the general goal of what we're trying to do is produce content with AI at a very rapid pace,
Mm-hmm.
but the podcast took a whole day to do, which is a lot longer. The Yesteryear Chronicles podcast takes about an hour, maybe an hour and a half to do at
Mm-hmm.
this point, and this one probably took 8 to 10 hours for the same amount of content.
Yeah.
Part of it's because GPT-4 at this point is terrible at writing like Grimes or being a person, having a consistent personality, being subtle, being like it's actually really not good. Like
Yeah.
I spent a few hours prompting it to try to imitate a certain style of speech or to imitate Grimes, and just nothing it produced was useful. So
Mm-hmm.
I actually hand wrote the entire episode myself,
Oh,
um,
wow.
as if I was Grimes. Um, Not only that, but at this point, the voice synthesis isn't good at being consistent or have a consistent emotion throughout. You can make it sound a little more emotional, a little more have dynamic range in its voice,
Mm-hmm.
but even if you do that, it doesn't necessarily mean the type of way the voice is dynamic is consistent throughout the entire generation.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, it's actually still very much a manual process if you want something to the level of the Grimy Love podcast, which is interesting, right? Which I think puts it at a very interesting point in time because I do believe these technologies can get better, right?
Mm-hmm.
AI right now is the worst it's ever going to be. So it's interesting to see, like, okay, like, here's the real challenges. Now that I've actually really played with this technology, here are the challenges that exist. And, like, are we going to overcome them? And, like, how long is it going to take us to overcome them? And I think some of them, it may take quite a long time, if ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's interesting because when you were talking about like building these characters, I just started thinking about like Dungeons and Dragons kind of style where you have to make this whole backstory and every action is always predictive based on the character's past actions, and sort of it's very difficult to fully encompass an entire human personality without like going into a lot of work developing that character. Um, I wanted to ask you also about the content for the Grimy Love podcast. I haven't listened to the full podcast. I've only watched the demo clip. But is that story actually real? Like it the you know
Yes, it is real. So actually, we grabbed all the stories from Reddit / relationship advice.
yeah.
So we grabbed 5 really interesting stories.
Hmm.
Um, I thought they were very interesting, and I thought it'd be very interesting to hear Grimes' kind of take on it, or AI Grimes' take on it. Um, and the one you're referring to is where a wife catches her husband sexting with Snapchat.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, that's a really 21st century problem, and it's very meta, right? And
Hmm.
in our AI Grimes' response, it's like, oh, like these are getting more and more similar to human beings, and like we really need to think about how we're going to interact with these AI systems, right? And it's really a comment on the whole episode, the whole podcast in general, but
Yeah.
just scaled down to this woman's issue with her husband.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all real stories from Reddit.
Yeah. I noticed that in the demo. Like I actually did a recording of a review that I'm going to be uploading later today. But I actually mentioned like I paused it and then I was like, this section could be talking about the podcast itself, where there's a limit to what you can do and can't do with AI, and it's only getting better. So there's like definitely a need to like think about the boundaries of stuff like that.
100%. I mean, this is really an interesting question, right? So what we're trying to do is explore what's possible and like how people feel about these AI generated podcasts, right? And I think in the same way that was touching upon like, okay, so these chatbots, right? These GPT-4 whatnot, you're going to be able to have these more intimate relationships with them. I'm not sure if you've heard of, I think it was called Replica.ai.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty
And
infamous.
yeah. So Replica.ai, for maybe the viewers who don't know, people were using it as their own like, how would
Personal.
you describe
It's like a personal, like girlfriend or
it?
boyfriend,
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of like that.
AI girlfriend, exactly. And then, for some reason, I'm not quite familiar, they actually made it less flirtatious and less girlfriendy.
Mm,
And most of the users revolted. Like that's what they came here for. And I think it's really interesting in this age of loneliness. Like I saw something where the U.S. Surgeon General the other day said like loneliness is like a pandemic. Like
yeah,
1 in 2 people don't have any close friends,
yeah.
and that's so scary. And so like, what is the appropriate role for these AI chatbots?
Hmm. Yeah. A point on that actually, I think mental health in general is down. And I feel like it's mostly due to the rise of like social media and connectedness. Like we can be connected 24/7, but wait, while we are connected, we're not really having meaningful kind of conversation. So it's like you're talking a lot throughout the day, but none of those things are like meaningful to you. So you don't really feel like the natural emotions of like real anger or love, happiness, stuff like that. And especially with the media right now, things are very like rage bait. Like it's
Yeah,
very easy for someone to get outraged. For example, like Twitter is a Twitter is a cesspool of this because every time I log on to Twitter, it's like I made like $2 million doing this in like 1 month. Click here to see how I did it, and then I click, and then it just I had like $5 million saved up, or I had some rich friends, or you know, it's just not sustainable circumstances that are like, oh yeah, this is my achievements, but not really because I have all these resources, and it's kind of a commentary on like the disparity of between people and kind of their relationship with each other, right? um so I'm a university student still. I'm still very young, and i I find my relationship with AI to be more of a tool, right? So like I ask it questions. But I'm like, me personally, I'm very polite to it. Like I find myself saying, "Please do this thing," or saying thanks for like that good response. And it's kind of ironic to me because I know there are some people that are like, do it this way, do it faster," and they like we treat these things as like robots, um, but they're also capable of like mimicking these kinds of thoughtful human interaction. And I'm starting to wonder if like you know have you watched the movie Her?
it's so funny. This came up in a conversation I had yesterday. I've not. I've tried and I fell asleep.
Okay.
But I get the general premise, which is there's this really advanced chatbot, think like, Siri in 3 years from now,
Hmm.
and then a guy falls in love with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, I actually have not seen it, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and I know like what happens. And basically, the guy's like, "Wait, how many people are you talking to that are just like me?" Um, and she's like, "A couple thousand." And there's some point that you realize that you're not special in this. Like it's just solving an issue for you. But I do think that these tools, when used properly, can get people to be healthier. Um, Kind of like encouraging them in a way to get out of their house and meet new friends. And I see a future where AIs can be like AIs can connect to other AIs. So instead of everybody running separate instances of GPT-4, it's like two instances of GPT-4 can recognize similar people and kind of pull them towards each other. And I think that would be like really cool to see in the future for enhancing like relationships or searching for co-founders for a startup or something. And yeah, this technology can go anywhere from here. It just really depends on what guidelines we set for it. And replica is terrible. Yeah.
I've never tried replica. I've only heard stories, but I mean, I agree with you. I think of it much like a tool, but I do think it has a lot of potential for good. For example, I had an idea a few years back of how do you connect people, whether at a convention or a party, right? Like, so there's all these different people coming to an event,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, you could use AI models to help say like, hey, you two should meet. You guys have similar interests. So we already know all about you and how your mannerisms are.
Mm-hmm.
And like, let me suggest a pairing, right? So that's one way. Or you can imagine, let's say you have an AI dog and now it wants to go for a walk. Or even maybe your phone. Maybe like an advanced version of Siri says like, hey, you've been in that house for,
Yeah.
13 hours. Like, why don't you take me for a walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is an app or something for people who are depressed or like, shut-ins, etc. I've seen a lot of people have been using these tools as like therapists, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think like that's amazing, right? People don't have people to talk to, or they don't trust people.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who have like innate trust issues if they do go to a counselor or therapist. But when they see a robot, they're like, well, the robot's not going to tell my secrets. The robot's not going to judge me. All these other benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, there's just a big surface area of these things that could be used for good.
Yeah. About the therapist one though, I'm not sure if I like fully trust them. Because, therapy is very complicated and to be a certified therapist, like not all therapists are good and everybody like kind of has their unique kind of lifestyle or personality. So it definitely needs to be more processed in a way. And yeah, so I
The way
wouldn't
I-
trust those therapy apps too
The
soon.
way I see it is um, one of the great kind of therapies you could do is like just write down your problems, like write down what you're feeling, right? Externalize it
Mhm.
so that you could process it. And by externalizing it, getting it out of your head, even if it's to a chatbot or whatever, I think that does a lot of the heavy lifting for therapy. So I
Mhm.
think once people have just really get to fully express what they're feeling, fully explain what they're going through, I think that could just do a lot of work.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Um. Yeah. On that point, also, it's like it. There might need to be some things in place. Like if someone's like suicidal and they tell a chatbot that, like, will the chatbot contact someone or that's kind of like a question, right? Like, oh, is it morally responsible to get contact the emergency to try to get help, or is it supposed to stay private and, not do anything?
And I think that's a good point. But I think that's a solvable problem, and I'm happy a person who's feeling like that has some outlet to externalize, like, hey, I'm feeling like this, even if it is to a chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
Better to have it be a chatbot than nobody. This
Mm-hmm.
is kind of my take.
Yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure all the conversations are stored by OpenAI somewhere.
Yeah.
But hopefully there's no like massive data leak.
Yeah, unless you pay for it as like a business, and then they won't store it. They say.
Yeah.
They say.
They say, yeah. um. Oh yeah. Are you going to be IRL in SF?
I'm actually really debating it right now. It'd be less of a debate, but my Mac kind of crapped out earlier this year, and so I got a brand new computer, which is excellent, but it's this giant machine with a 4090 like Windows machine. So I'm like, okay, if I go, I don't have really a laptop to work on. So that's really a disadvantage. So I'm like, okay, do I really want to spend the money to go buy a new laptop when I just bought this new desktop? So I'm kind of on the fence as of right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you need a laptop, right? Have you gone to the previous seasons or
No, not at
no?
all. I'm on the other side of the country too. I'm in Boston, so I'm not even close.
Yeah, I'm in Philly right now, so I'll be flying across the country. Um, but yeah, I wasn't imagining this as like, oh, I bring my laptop and I do more work there. I'm thinking like this is a chance to kind of get to know other people IRL, and kind of make some friends, and meet some of the people that have been, grinding for the past 6 weeks.
Okay, like you're definitely convincing. I mean, I really am struggling with this question. I haven't made up my mind whether I am or I'm not, but I know I probably don't have tons of time. I hear there's a cap to how many people can go. So
Yeah, it's like 200 or something, but yeah.
we'll see.
If you do go, there's a question on the forum. It says like, what do you want to accomplish on the trip? Like, what would make it a successful trip? What would you answer for that?
Honestly, I'm interested in just meeting other builders. I know
Mm-hmm.
I've met a lot of people through buildspace nights and weekends already, and like we have like a group chat of I have multiple group chats with people who are interested in AI and doing the same things I am, who are playing with like LangChain, who are playing with all these new technologies. And so the social aspect of buildspace has probably been my favorite aspect of buildspace so far.
Mm, yeah. I feel like last season I didn't really connect with anyone except like Alec for one time, one on one. And then I was like, you know, um, I kind of got frustrated with, my development, and I just stopped working on it after like 5 weeks or something. Um, but this time I made a commitment to be like, okay, I'm gonna reach out to other people. I'm not gonna wait for anyone to like hit me up because I, had like 20 followers or something, on Twitter, and I'm just going to start posting consistently and, trying to connect with people either through reviews or like interviews like this. And so far it's been pretty successful, but I do want to make sure that, the connections last, right? So boat space is 6 weeks, which is a long time, but not that long of a time. And a lot of people are like really hype, and they're like, oh, I love what you're doing. And then, after like 2 weeks, they're like, forget about you. And not that that's bad, right? Like that's pretty normal if your project is mediocre, or if you're still like working on improving it. Um, but it's like if you have one really good supporter, I think, that's one person that you can reach out to in the future anytime, like anywhere. And I kind of
I don't
want to form those kinds of connection.
100%. I wouldn't take people not reaching out or having close connections as being a reflection of your project or your work or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. I think a lot of people are just very busy and have too many connections. I'm a terrible long distance friend. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I that's just something I've struggled with my whole life. Is I've had more people who I could connect with, or like more connections that I've been able to keep up with. Uh, and I would hope that those people don't feel like I don't care about them or think less about them, or that they couldn't reach out to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like I'm already overloaded. My social bandwidth personally is not very high, so I just wouldn't take that as, you know, wouldn't take the connections getting weaker over time or people not connecting as any sort of sign about yourself
Yeah.
or your project, or etc.
Yeah.
You know, you could always reach out to me. I hereby make a commitment. You can reach out to me, and like, I too hope to get some of the closer relationships. But even all these like relationships where I've just had a little bit of back and forth with a lot of different people, I find that very valuable to me as well.
Yeah. And it makes you, you know, feel like happy, you know, when someone's reaching out and they're like, hey, I really like the video you made or the podcast episode you made, or this is really cool. Like, I, you know, supporting what you're doing. Um, yeah, that
Dopamine's great. I love
yeah,
the dopamine.
dude, the seeing the numbers go up, it's not healthy long term.
We picked the wrong metric to um, follow. So we followed subscribers on Spotify,
Mm-hmm.
which we thought was like an important, interesting metric.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I checked this morning and we've got 2 subscribers to the grimeylove podcast, and I've gotten probably 15 people saying that they love the podcast. Like, first, like sending me messages saying, like, "Oh, this is really good. This is great." And I'm like, "Shoot, that's at least 15 people who love the podcast. We only got 2 subscribers. Now I'm reporting it to Barthel. Like, yeah, we've got, you know, we've got like 300, 400 plays, and we've only got 41 subscribers. So it's like,
Yeah. Faza doesn't like plays because, you know, one person could play the podcast multiple times.
right.
But yeah, same for my videos. Like I'm tracking unique viewers. And I don't know what happened in the previous weeks, but the first week I like made a ton of videos and I got like 550 viewers. And the second week I made less, about the same, but a little less number of videos. Um, but I only got 300, you know, 330 something unique viewers. But the thing is, those viewers were watching for longer and they were like sticking around.
Right.
So, you know, I'm not very disappointed in that. I'm happy with, you know, 300 people is more than I talk to on like a weekly basis or a monthly basis.
Right.
So, you know, to me, I'm already pretty successful.
Yeah.
Just yeah.
I think it's so important to run your own race. I mean, the way buildspace is set up, you know, I think it rewards some people who are doing really awesome things as far as the points go.
Mm-hmm.
The revenue people are generating, I think, is like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, super kudos to those people who have gotten, you know, a few $1,000s in revenue. Like, that's awesome. I mean, we're like 3-4 weeks in.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, you know, I started the Beat Boot Media, which is what we call the podcast network, as kind of an experiment and a project, and to like play around with things, and like the getting users advertising part of it was less important to us than figuring out what these technologies are capable of to these technologies.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other questions that you want to ask me?
No, you said what you're trying to get out of buildspace is a long-term relationship with, one or two or very few amount of people. Do you think you're on your road there? I mean, that's really the goal. Like,
I'm so I can't really like judge how other people think of me. I'm like really bad at that. But what I'm doing is just being supportive first as kind of like an open invitation, right? So like looking for people, I advertise on Twitter like if you want to talk to me, you can just hit me up in my DMs and I'll look at your project, I'll tell you like my thoughts on it. And we can have like a one-on-one chat like this that's very casual. Um, and I say this to everyone who does this interview. Like, if you pop off and you get bought out by Apple in like 10 years, and you know down the line, if you're very successful, this video will be on YouTube for you to look back on, your humble beginnings kind of thing.
that's great.
And
For you too.
yeah,
For you too.
I
When you
mean,
pop off.
I if I ever pop off, sure. But yeah, it's more like this is a chance to kind of see history in the making, and I'm already supporting a lot of like projects. Like off the top of my head, I'm a big fan of Huddle Space. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's um, like a virtual meeting space. And that was actually the previous interview I did. So if you go to my channel, you can check it out. And I'm going to be seeing Justin Carter at the IRL. He just
Right.
told me he bought his ticket, and he's like a he worked as like a tax kind of guy, finance guy for like 12 years, and now he's shifting into like helping business owners evaluate the cost or value of the business. And he made like this website called business-worthy.com. And I'm also a big fan of two people that are around my age, I think, and they made a visual novel game called Wake Up on itch.io. And if you check my Twitter, I actually posted a video of me playing through the game for the first time. So yeah, I'm like, those projects, like, they're not like popping off or anything. Like, they're not getting thousands of dollars in revenue. They're not getting 100,000 viewers or followers. But they're like cool people. They have good ideas, and I'm doing my part to support them, and I hope in return they'll also support me. But that's an open invitation kind of thing. So
Right.
I don't expect that.
Well, I'm definitely gonna check out the game. Was it long?
I think my first playthrough took me about 20 minutes. I did do like the user testing, so I kind of knew something before. Um, but if you're planning to play the game, I would say download the game and play through it first, and then watch my video. Cause
Okay.
yeah, cause I it's just my opinion, but playing through a game blind is much better experience than watching someone play and then playing it for yourself.
I totally agree with you. I don't even like watching movie trailers too much. I
Yeah,
don't
because
want
they
to see anything.
spoil like
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
What are you going to college for? You said you're in school still?
Yeah, so I'm in my senior year. I'm studying mechanical engineering actually. So, but I have like many interests. So like I'm doing videos on all sorts of things, and I'm getting a minor in interdisciplinary problem solving. So, I'm involved in like tech and mechanical engineering and like psychology and philosophy and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Mechanical engineers are. I I honestly think that's like one of the most badass degrees you can get. Like,
I mean, it's certainly hard.
yeah, like engineering. Like sometimes I laugh. I can code, I can program decently, and I am a software engineer. But I think it's so funny because uh, calling what I do engineering is just. I think it's just funny because I think engineers do stuff that's like way harder. In my mind,
Yeah.
engineers are way smarter. The only engineer friend I ever had, or I guess I've had a few, but they've all been like just way smarter than I am.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm on the same level as you're imagining. I do know people like that in my major that are like working for NASA already part time and like designing rockets and stuff like that.
The real world's so much harder than the digital world. I mean, if I screw something up, I just like delete the line, I control Z,
Yeah, if I break a part, it's like, that's actually manufactured, and yeah, it's just a different kind of process. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. Do you have any plans for what you want to do after you graduate?
I'm keeping my options open. I'm looking for jobs, and you know, maybe I'll start a business. I don't know. Half joking.
I, I, I mean, I've been like hacking away at being like a solo entrepreneur for a while, and I gotta tell you, I find it extremely rewarding.
Yeah.
Even though it's like hard, and like so my group of friends, I make like the least amount of money. Everybody, like the friends that I mostly hang out with, are all like FANG engineers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not FANG engineers, but they all work for like big tech.
And they just make so much money.
Yeah.
And I feel like I could go down that route, but at the same time, I'm like, I really enjoy just hacking on things and making my own money and being my kind of own boss and just following my own curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I don't have to, I don't know, just like do things I don't want to do, really.
Yeah. You have your own agency basically.
Right.
To do what
Right.
you want.
So I value that just very highly. So I would recommend starting a business. I mean, obviously you see all these people in buildspace making thousands of dollars in a few weeks, so it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, I just need to find a good idea and build it and, launch it and measure.
Look, it takes, years to become an overnight success.
Yeah.
So,
Years of work and training just to have that one day of fame. Yeah. I mean, I think our time is almost up, and most people don't take the whole hour. So this is like completely fine. If you want to end it here.
Yeah, I think we can end it here. I got a bunch of work I've been avoiding doing anyways, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was great talking to you, Jake.
It was great talking to you, Kevin, and if I do end up going to San Fran, I hope,
Yeah, DM me. Hit me up.
Are you 21?
Yeah.
I
I'm
was gonna say
22.
we could share a beer.
Yeah. I don't drink though, but
Okay.
I'll drink like a Coke and you can have the beer.
That's fair enough. Fair enough, Kevin.
Yeah.
All
All right. See you.
See ya.